All right, MFPers, we are back for another episode of the Just Show Up podcast. Last week we had a wonderful guest, JT Critz. Now it's back to Joe and I, back on our regular grind for the next few weeks. And today we are going to talk about practicing accommodating our inner necessities, which is pain. And I think pain is a very popular topic when it comes into the physical world, but also how it applies to our mental, emotional, and spiritual world as well. And I always just find this a really interesting topic to talk about, especially as a trainer in the CrossFit world. And, you know, we talk about pain, and really I think that's something that we can evolve our relationship with as a whole. So before we talk about pain, the brain, and how we sustain it, let's take our 3 breaths, and then we'll get right into it. So just sit up tall, find your space, stop doing what you're doing. And all we're going to just do is a quick scan of your body. As you scan, go from your toes all the way up to your nose. Start from the bottom. And all you're doing is just simply being aware. Feet, ankles, calves, shins, knees, thighs, hamstrings, glutes, groin, pelvis, lower abdominals, stomach, chest, upper back, armpit areas, tops of your shoulders, back of your shoulders, front of your shoulders, back of the arm, front of the arm, forearm, wrist, hands. Go to the throat, back of the head, top of the head, sides of the cheeks, forehead, and the face. By simply going through a quick scan like that, you automatically have the ability to expand your consciousness and your awareness just within the physical plane. Let's take our 3 breaths. Take a deep inhale through your nose. Hold your breath. Big exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Last breath. Holds. And let it out. All right. Joe, let it rip.
All right, so my quote is, sometimes my quotes are like indirectly related. Today it's just like very much directly related to the topic. It's from Andrew Huberman. Says, the amount of pleasure you eventually experience is directly related to how much pain you experience. Giving somebody a 10-minute ice bath, for instance, or even a 3-minute ice bath, or a 1-minute ice bath is quite painful. But there was a study from the University of Prague, the European Journal of Physiology. It showed that after a painful ice bath stimulus, the amount of dopamine release goes up for 2.5 hours to 250% above baseline. And that's not even because of the ice bath itself evokes dopamine release. A lot of people think, oh, cold water evokes dopamine release. No, pain evokes dopamine release after the pain is over. Just understanding the more friction and pain you experience, the greater the dopamine reward you will get later. Doing hard things apparently makes you happier. Obviously, like, really interesting quote, a lot of interesting stuff here directly related to like what we're going to talk about today, a lot of like what we do here at MFP, not just with, you know, fitness and doing hard things physically, but also like our work with cold exposure and heat exposure. What was really interesting about this quote was where I pulled it from off like the database had like this graphic showing like the paths you could take, like doing something painful, doing something hard, and how that leads to happiness, and how doing something in the moment that is very comfortable oftentimes leads to like that initial like desire just to like do something easy and comfortable leads to unhappiness down the road. Whether you think about like not investing in your health, not investing in decisions that'll help you or your family down the road. So, like I said, it's not hard to think how this is going to tie into our conversation today, but I think it's a good start.
No, I love that. I think it's great too that it kind of applies after last week. And one of the bigger things I think we took from last week with JT was just like how CrossFit allows that challenging stimulus to have growth outside of the gym. And, you know, the concept of pain will become a relative concept because, I mean, I think when we generally think about what pain means, we think of like a physical byproduct of something within the body, you know, our bones, our internal organs, our muscular system, our ligaments, tendons, especially because what we do here is a very physical practice, right? But pain can become so much more than having to be a stimulus from the physical body. It can also be a mental, emotional, and even a spiritual stimulus that allows the nervous system to have an opportunity to rewire itself and create adaptation. And obviously what Huberman does, which is very, very beneficial, it's very science-based, and he talks obviously a lot about how neurotransmitters work in the body. We have dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, why am I drawing a blank? Endorphins.
Yeah.
So, you know, when those are like our main neurotransmitters, these are obviously really important for our brain to hardwire these very important chemicals that make us feel good. But it's like they can only come about when there is something that brings us out of homeostasis, that brings us out of this state of being in our comfort zone, being in our blankets, our warm, fuzzy blankets, which I get every morning because I get my nice comforter and I get my cat snuggling with me and I feel comfortable. And then all of a sudden when I get up, I'm uncomfortable, right? But like this is really, like, and again, this is something we talk about almost all the time. It's just like, this is literally part of like why our soul manifests on planet Earth, the video game, is to learn how to work through challenges, basically. So I think that's great, and I think that's kind of really dives deep into like where we're going to start going with this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be experiencing all levels of that on Sunday at like 12 o'clock when I'm running the marathon, when I'm at mile 20.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, I'm excited to get into this, man.
You guys think Coach Joe's going to finish this marathon? I do.
I'm finishing the marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is going to be a great segue later on when we talk about physical performance and pain. So, yeah, I think the first thing is just really diving into the concept of pain. You know, and again, it's just like, why do we even experience it to begin with? And I think the big thing I really want to get into is like, how do we create a relationship with this idea of what pain is, and how do we allow it to look at from a beneficial standpoint? Because again, typically what we see a lot of here is like, you guys will experience the mental challenge of a workout that causes a mental discomfort, maybe an emotional discomfort, obviously the physical discomfort. You know, you feel like a muscular burn and sensation that's going to make you think a certain way, or it's going to cause you a limitation in your movement in your workout. And we also may experience like soreness, and obviously like everybody just like wants to feel sore. They feel, I did something when I'm feeling sore. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the concept of like, you know, tendons and ligaments, which happens usually a lot. I mean, we are doing things that are hard physically, and you know, we have to be smart with how we understand our body and how the tendons tolerate and how we have progression and growth. And, you know, then we have something like an actual really deep discomfort or hurt or injury that is causing us severe limitations. Yeah. And I kind of want to touch on all these things about, at least from that physical perspective. And then when we talk about the mental perspective, it comes down, like we talked about a few weeks ago, like thought processes and how the thought process translate into pain. And then we have the emotional concept of pain, which is, you know, the emotions of, you know, fear, hate, grief, sadness, like those things feel painful, quote unquote, emotionally. And then we have the whole spiritual concept of pain, not just when we're talking about from the soul and providing challenge, but I think pain from the spiritual level comes from like when we feel like we are losing purpose and excitement in our lives, and that causes a whole variety of pain on all those different levels. And really the big thing we want to start with is the physical body, because that's the easiest for our nervous system to navigate when it comes to pain and being aware of what pain actually is. And so what I started with in the 3 breaths was a body scan, because I really feel like the majority of our population really lacks the awareness of really tuning in to the physical experience of the body. And the more aware of we are of our body with the little minute details from, again, the toes to the nose, is really important for us to actually make a healthy relationship to how we perceive pain and how we navigate pain.
Yeah, and I think to start, like, as you said, the most important thing is really like developing a relationship with pain, which is like, sounds like kind of a weird thing to say, but when you think about it, it's really important to know, to like really be aware of like what you're experiencing on every level, whether that's physical, emotional, or spiritual. For example, like on the physical level, that one, a lot of people, it sounds like it's the simplest, but it's actually, for a lot of people who are new to fitness, it's hard, because there is a difference between discomfort, like, which is pain, and like legitimate, like, restricting pain. And then also emotionally, like, there also is a difference between, you know, facing and being aware of something unpleasant and genuinely feeling like true psychological, true emotional pain. Because like, there are plenty of people like who, I mean, you could be the happiest person in the world, but you're not going to be happy all day. You know, like, you will experience some form of highs, lows, but there's a difference between being in that constant chronic state rather than it being like more acute. So, you know, I think that we kind of get scared of talking about pain, and we're scared to experience it, when like we need to experience it to understand, like, number one, what it is, and number two, how to really make it to the other side feeling so much better.
Yeah, 100%. And again, that all starts with awareness, right? You have to expand your consciousness, particularly, again, within, for most of us, the physical plane. So that's one of the reasons why I just, again, come back to like CrossFit being such a valuable fitness routine or regimen and program, is because the more variety you have through movement, the more flexibility and capacity you have to be more aware of your body. And that's kind of really like the deeper reasoning to like why at MFP, at least, you guys see so much variety, is because I just want to expand your consciousness. And, you know, I'm never going to say it like that to you guys, but that really is the end game. It's become more aware of our body. And that's one of the reasons, like, why, you know, obviously we have the physical benefits of like not working out with your shoes, or one of the reasons why we do a lot of like exaggerate your breathing during a lot of the things and just doing a lot of tempo, is because you have no other choice but to think. And that's really about awareness. Like, you have to think about your movement. And I've been in all the spaces where, again, I've seen people who just lack awareness. And it's not like intentionally they're not trying to be aware. They just never had the ability within their brains and their nervous system to learn. And let's just say, for example, when I work a lot with like middle school or younger or high school age kids, like a lot of them just lack physical awareness of how to move their body. And we see it a lot too, especially with newbies and even people who are who've been doing CrossFit for a while but still learning a new skill. Like, the ability for your brain to potentially, let's just say, like, visually look at a movement and then reciprocate it, or take a verbal or audio cue and then reciprocate that into the physical body, is a form of physical awareness. And the idea here I'm trying to get at is, like, the more capable you are of eventually expanding that ability to see something, hear something, and then process it throughout your brain and then into a physical movement in, the way that it's trying to be explained is huge. And again, that literally starts with like you thinking about every little detail in your body. And the hardest part, I think, like, for example, like I was saying today during our workout, was like, we do like Metcons. We do things like 3-6-9, deadlift, box jump, rings. And, the deadlifts are heavy. And it's like you're going to approach a heavy deadlift while you're breathing in fatigue. Can you have that awareness to approach the bar, get your breathing, get your bracing? Don't just pick it up, with poor technique. Like, you have to be aware and super mindful of how your body is going to stabilize under a heavy weight as you're breathing. So like something like that is just the way of like how we incorporate physical awareness in a workout that doesn't provide you a lot of time to think. Like, you have to think as you're doing it.
Yeah.
And I know most people don't do that. Most people probably aren't thinking like, but for me, it's just something that I've always processed, even at a young age through sport and movement, is like, I'm always just constantly trying to be conscious and aware of every little detail as I'm doing a movement. And there's no excuse, even when I'm towards the end of a workout where I'm trying to sell my soul.
Yeah. And like, there's this interesting dichotomy with humans, because like we very much understand just through history and neuroscience that it is necessary to experience pain to not only grow, but also become better, become happier, become the best versions of ourselves. But with that in mind, humans hate feeling pain. Like, it is so uncomfortable. And like, our first response is to run. Like, even when something is physically uncomfortable, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, something's uncomfortable, like we get in that loop where we want to run, right? And then like growth happens when you finally don't run, when you finally face it, when you finally, accept it, when you're aware of it. But, I think that in order for people to kind of improve their relationship with pain, they have to just start to become aware that it's normal to not like it.
Yeah.
It's not like, life's not easy, and it's not supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, let's take that into some like practical things too. So let's just say, for example, I think one of the bigger struggles with people's relationship with physical pain we see is like the differentiation between sore and I just have some discomfort, or I actually have an injury. And I think at least for a majority of people who are new to understanding physical awareness of their bodies, people tend to think they're actually have a quote unquote injury.
Yeah.
Versus they're just experiencing an adaptation to what they've done. And that takes a lot of trial and error, honestly. I mean, even for myself, I've been super aware of my physical body for many years, but like I have actual quote unquote injuries, and I've had to learn to navigate like my pain and relationship with those injuries, and how, when am I actually in discomfort? When am I actually pushing the limit too much? When am I, what's the right space for me to continue to work with this? And I've also had to navigate like my relationship to soreness, because I really think a lot of people who are experienced with CrossFit, they seek to be completely sore and out of commission, which I think is actually the reverse of the relationship. Like, we should not be, and this is scientifically studied in terms of like, to receive the benefits when it comes to muscular growth, physical capacity, skill, like you don't have to be in so much soreness or have DOMS, which is delayed onset muscle soreness, where some of you guys might get it 2 days after, which is normal, to actually get better at what you're trying to achieve with your physical accomplishments. And so what I'm trying to get here is like, do you have the ability to navigate, okay, am I in just discomfort, soreness? Am I in like actual pain where I need to maybe modify and do something differently? Not saying, hey, you got to take completely off, which I would never usually recommend. Movement is medicine. And then do I actually have an injury? And do I have the ability to navigate that injury with a relationship with hey, like this isn't like maybe this is allowing me to grow and challenge myself in a new way that has me rethink about how I approach my physical movement. So I'm actually looking at injury as a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that might allow you to expand your awareness for yourself of how you move and how you actually create a better relationship with your fitness protocols, your routine, or whatever you're doing. And same goes with that relationship to soreness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting approach and it's a good way to think about it because, especially like if people are new, one of the biggest things that they fear always is like injury. That's all, getting hurt. That's always one of the if you're in the CrossFit world, a new person comes in, usually they're like, yeah, I don't want to get hurt, all right, which is a totally valid thing to say, like, you don't want to get hurt. But you'll find that people who, are here for years and develop that awareness with their body, they always find a way to move. Like, they always have that relationship with pain. They always have that awareness that sometimes something is not quite right, and then you need to be a little bit more mindful here. So, that fear to run, that fear to be, that like instinct to run, and that idea that I can't experience any sort of discomfort really could be a limiting factor, like in terms of like your growth and your whole potential.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that too in a little bit. It's like how we maybe can shift our mindset to like, well, concepts of pain. I'm not going to say again pain in terms of like physical injury, but like just general concepts of pain, like we talked about, are essentially inevitable, meaning pain is going to come into our lives in some form or matter. But I think, again, coming back to like relationships with pain, and again, we see it all the time, even though it's like very sarcastic, for sometimes it's like the older population, and we could say like, oh, we're getting older. Or I'm not going to even say that you're old, because I don't even think that's the right terminology, because really it starts with our thoughts and how we view ourselves and our belief systems of how we are as humans. But, as you're approaching 40s, 50s, 60s, it's like, oh, wait till you get to this age. Like, you're going to have all these things. And it's like, yeah, like we are going to have physical limitations. We are probably going to have physical pains that might limit us. But the worst thing that we do for our thought systems and our actual frequency, our positive frequency, is when we start creating thoughts that come into words that, even though they're sarcastic, like you are automatically putting out into the quantum field that you are potentially this broken glass, even though you're still here, you're doing things and you don't believe it. Don't say you said it.
Yeah.
It was a thought that came into a word. Doesn't matter if it's sarcastic. And so like you have to start to create this narrative, and this is something like an oath I had to myself is, no matter what, like I know that these things will come, but like I'm not going to allow it to create limitations in my physical body for me to achieve certain things. However, my relationship to doing muscle ups and heavier lifts per se may change. I'm still not going to be physically limited with those things. So again, I just think when it comes to how we speak about like how your body is going to change, and then how we can think about like pain is inevitable from, again, the challenges and the mental approaches, that could be a whole game changer for our overall health.
Yeah. And
I think there's we have a long way to go as a society to get there, but I'm very optimistic that like we can just start to create, that atmosphere here at MFP to help people maybe start to think differently about that.
Yeah, it's important too to know like the legitimate reality of having like legitimate like serious chronic pain is not like that's a terrible thing, and like knowing that just because you experience pain acutely doesn't mean that it's forever, even though it's going to feel that way. So it all comes down to really understanding, and I think for us like diving into like what a relationship with pain like genuinely looks like how you could form a relationship with pain, because like I don't want, like it's not like we're saying like, oh, like you have to, like being in pain is awesome, like it's like objectively uncomfortable. Like how do you start to develop that relationship with pain so you can legitimately, like we were saying, like become happier, become better?
Well, it's actually, I don't want to go off. We'll switch gears here in a second to like some science stuff, but something that came to my mind is, and I've read a lot about in a lot of my spiritual readings, just about like, there's people, so many people on this planet that are going to live their whole lives with some sort of ailment, let's just say, that are going to cause them daily physical pain, probably mental, emotional pain as well. However, their spiritual viewpoint of their suffering is completely different than how we might perceive them. And so one example would be like, I was just scrolling on Instagram. I see this guy who he looks physically great, but like his one upper body, his shoulder and his arm is like completely dwindled away. And he had this like serious accident and had this whole, change in his life. It was kind of like traumatizing, you could tell, but like he made this comeback where like he got back into his bodybuilding, but like he still can't, he's completely paralyzed. And so he has this like physical ailment, pain he probably still goes through, but like he's just so motivated. Like he used this lifelong challenge. Like, you see people who like go through accidents and they end up walking again. All this, like, this kid's going to be paralyzed like that for the rest of his life, quote unquote. And he's still finding meaning and purpose out of this. Yeah. So he's not like the whole why me situation. He's like, there's something to this. I'm going to make something out of this. I'm going to use this for me to be a better human being, even though like it's quite tragic for somebody. Like he can't ever use his arm again. Yeah. Right. And I see that a lot with stories with people who still find meaning and purpose in life that allows them to use their story in a way that's admiring, it's inspirational. So, even when it comes to like these different forms of like pain or limitations, how do we still, again, find meaning to that? Yeah. Right? That's the really deeper part of a lot of this.
Well, there's a similar interesting like phenomenon, like when you look at historical data of countries throughout history, you would think that like overall morale in countries across the world would be lowest and at their like worst during hard times like war times. But when you look back at like certain like census reports of like, especially during like horrible war times, World War II, the morale in wartime countries is always significantly higher. Like it's a fascinating thing. Like when people are going through some sort of collective pain, like the morale also finds a way to like with that rise. Right. Like there is that, you see that not just in like physical experience, but you see it like historically as well. If you're a little bit of a history nerd, you want to do some deep dives.
Oh no, I'd love to. I mean, I could go down a whole deep dive spiritually of like why that all happens, but 100% I agree with that, man. And maybe we'll come back to this on a whole nother topic for another day. Because we got a few things I want to touch on here is coming back to like the physical experience and just some concepts about the brain and physical pain. And this is something I was talking to Dr. Chris Leib about, and just to give you guys an update, starting December 1st, Chris will be next door, RIP Jim Miller Roofing, in terms of the business on this side. He's going to be moving down the street finally. Obviously, you guys see the trucks are no longer in the parking lot. Things are progressing, finally. Okay, it's happening. And Dr. Chris Leib, who you guys will all love, some of you already know him. He works obviously in physical therapy and movement and longevity. And we talked a lot about this idea of like, especially if you are somebody who's had an injury in the past. For example, like I've had plenty of injuries, like your brain needs to eventually come out of this feedback loop of thinking that it's injured. And I see this a lot in a lot of people, like, and you'll see like people are like, I think I have, these tears, it feels bad, and you get an MRI or something on it and it shows nothing. Yeah. What's wrong with it, right? And this happens a lot. And obviously we're all gonna have eventually an arthritic response, a degeneration of some tissues, okay? That doesn't necessarily all mean that you're gonna have a physical pain response. And then there's a whole lot of layers to the brain in terms of like, again, these neurotransmitters being released due to that. And obviously inflammation and nutrition and so many factors go in. But big thing I'm trying to get into is like the brain starts to think that it is still in that loop of feeling that response, maybe from an injury or just maybe something that caused a traumatic issue to a physical part of our body. And the hard part is like, well, how do we actually get the brain out of that loop for it to actually heal? And that was really one of those interesting conversations I had with Dr. Chris Lieb, was to how we actually start to get it out of this loop. And it really does start with like, you have to dive into the pain. Like you have to face it.
Yeah, and that's what anxiety is too. Like anxiety disorders, the fear, it feels so real because the brain thinks it's actually in danger.
Right.
Like people aren't, like when people are like really stuck in these anxiety like attacks or like feel like their brains are kind of locked on something, like it's legit. Like you feel like your brain legitimately feels like the same response that maybe our ancestors would get when we were getting attacked by a bear, like you like, although we're sitting home and we're scrolling on Instagram, like your brain genuinely feels that fear loop. So like the only way to like really get through it is to like genuinely, like exposure is such a, like not only exposure, but just like preventing that fear response, that running response when you're like, that's why the ice bath is such a good tool, just finding calm and peace, being mindful of the pain you're noticing and like kind of riding that wave is like, it's one of the best anxiety ways to like recover.
100%. And that's a lot of like what I do with, inner work and plant medicines and meditation and mindfulness. Like we talked about, like you actually have to face what's there to overcome it. There's really no other way. And this is our whole concept of medicine 3.0 of what we continually talk about week to week. And obviously like, we know through the cold exposure, like people who might deal with anxiety and depression are having difficulties within their nervous system to release these neurotransmitters that allow them to feel good. But in the end, like what's the triggering, what's the deep root that is causing the anxiety or the fear to come up? And that's something where you got to like go a little deeper to face it and just acknowledging like, hey, it's there first. And same with the physical stuff, right? Like when you're going through, even though you might be feeling pain, and there's nothing structurally wrong with it per se, you have to like actually feel some sort of physical discomfort through doing prehab, rehab, physical activity exercises, putting it through that range of motion, even though you're feeling it. And a common example would be for me, like I've had 2 knee surgeries. I still have tears in both of my meniscus on my knees. I could probably go back and get another surgery if I needed to. I have chronic swelling, and I also have, quote unquote, the arthritis of an 80-year-old in my left knee from so many years of, it wasn't CrossFit related per se until I got into doing those things. But I've learned that like I need to do challenging things to get my brain past these feedback loops of pain that, even though I'm experiencing physical pain and discomfort, like for me to increase my range of motion, strength and stability in the tendons and ligaments that I need to surround with structure stability to make progress, it's been really helpful. And that's taken me years. And I still experience pain, but like I noticed, like I now have the awareness and tools to notice, like, is this a nervous system loop or is this actual pain? So I think it goes a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. But again, that whole spiel was just like coming back to, there's so many more layers, and we just need to, again, like develop our whole awareness of our physical body and sensations, and start with like mindfulness practices and like the body scan, or just like we said in meditation, and facing fears and your thoughts.
And I think what's important to distinguish too is like, this isn't us kind of discounting the pain you feel, being like, it's no big deal. Like this is like me and like this is us saying genuinely like it sucks, like it's really hard. And but what I think it really shows is the testament of like how capable you actually are. Like it shows like just like your potential, like your capability that you legitimately can face something that's really hard. Because saying that it's easy is not true. Like everybody experiences pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, in like some capacity. And no matter who you are, like it's totally valid. It's going to be really hard. It's just like it just shows how capable and strong you are that you can do it.
Yeah. And well, I mean, let's talk about one of the bigger things I think we all can admire is understanding how in the performance world, you know, athletes and ourselves included can just push past like the mental thought barrier of pain. Even like your brain might think that you're going to experience pain before you even experience it, right? Because there's a fear.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe you're going through it and we still see like these endeavors physically that humans can you know, accomplish, and you know, like they're definitely experiencing all variations of pain. And like you're gonna go through the whole roller coaster this weekend, man. You're gonna go through, you know, the mental thought process of like, I got 26 miles to run, and I got, you know, I'm gonna feel it here, and I know my thoughts are gonna go here, and I know physically it's gonna go here, and we still see like people being able to overcome the physical pain barrier because their mental tolerance, the way they navigate thoughts is their threshold is so high. And you know, I think that's something you're going to have to work through. So tell us a little bit about it, man. What's going to be your mantra? What's going to be your thought when you're hitting, you know, 16, 18 miles and like you're starting to feel that shit going all through you?
I think it's that like I'm finishing, like no matter what, like I'm crossing the finish line, and two, like that I'm capable, you know, because like there's like on the other side of that like really hard part, like it feels so good, and like and I know that, but for me it's like just having this like unwavering confidence. Like now when I talk about it, I don't even say like I hope I finish, like I know I'm gonna finish, you know, like I know I'm finishing. There's really nothing that's going to prevent me from it. It's just, you know, I'm actually at the point where like I'm looking forward to like that kind of challenge. Like it's something that's why I did it, right? Because like I'm not a marathon runner. I like to run, but 26 miles is not what I want to do. But like I want to do something really, really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really where we see the overcoming of physical pain and athletic performances is like there's this deep inner sense of I don't know if I want to say suffering, but I do want to say suffering.
Yeah.
There's again this innate component of our soul of what it wants to learn, grow, evolve, change, and to look at that experience in a way where it can positively overcome what it's going through. And, you know, I don't think most of people don't think about it like this, but I do now whenever I do, say for example, when I do sauna and cold plunge, I'm like, for me, it's not even about the physical thing. I'm like, I'm just trying to grow spiritually when I do this. Like my soul wants to experience this, to know that it overcomes every single time. And, you know, I just admire seeing human beings overcome achievements. Like, for example, I just saw, like, it happened like a year ago, but the guy bear crawled a marathon.
Amazing. Like,
right?
I can't imagine.
Like how much, and you could just see like
the
pain physically, like he's going through to like stop every X amount of miles. It took him, you know, 20 hours, right? And then we have, you know, let's relate it to CrossFit. Like we see someone like Rich Froning, Matt Fraser, Tia Claire Toomey, Annie Thorisdottir, like the greatest CrossFit athletes who can withstand. I mean, think about what you guys do 10 times faster and 10 times more difficult.
Yeah.
And obviously there's the capacity and the skill involved, but like to do what they do requires a very high mental pain tolerance of being able to push that. Like Matt Fraser was probably one of those people who just loved to feel the physical pain and push through it. And you guys can do it too. Like you can always tell yourself, like, I can always do one more, right? I can always do one more. You see guys like David Goggins, who's very notorious out there. He's a big, and these are like runners, right? I think endurance-based events are really where you see like the high mental pain tolerance. But we also see in like heavy weight training, the Olympics and different sports, and work, people do like Olympic lifting and powerlifting and strongman, strongwoman. But you also see it like this mental resiliency in just other types of physical events that, like the free solo guy. Yeah. The rock climbing was just like the will. Yeah. Again, this is a whole other part of like the soul embodies itself into this essence of will and human experience to want to endure something. And that kind of comes back to like their whole message from the very beginning. It's like, how are you seeking a form of mental pain, maybe physical pain in your day-to-day life, or occasionally that allows you to maybe go back to what you do on a day-to-day basis with a little bit more gratitude, right? Like, I overcame this. Like it makes me look at life from a whole new point of view that makes me feel like life is just beautiful. I'm grateful for this experience I have. Yeah. And even if you don't overcome it, it's just the idea of like, I put myself in a situation that makes me uncomfortable. And, I'm talking a lot here, but I just think about like the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight, right? Like, although anticlimactic, we all did get to see, Mike Tyson's full moon on the night of a full moon on live television. But like, think about it. Like, obviously they're both getting paid millions and millions of dollars, right? And so they already succeed. But there's definitely fear. Like, you're putting yourself out there in these crowds, and I mean, let's like even look at the females. Let's talk about the females for a minute who fought before them, who were vicious.
Oh my God, yeah.
But like that fear and the mental, actually, let's just talk about it real quick. Cause like now we're talking about pain, and look at the sport of boxing. Yeah. Like, okay, the physical pain you endure to like accomplish this passion of yours, right? I mean, this woman, like, her eye was gashed. She was obviously headbutting her, the one woman. But like, that's so deep for me. Yeah. Look at that, because that's how I look. I'm like, this is a deep spiritual practice. They don't even recognize it, but like the physical pain they're going through, and obviously like the mental discomfort of like performing in front of 75,000 plus millions of other people on a live stream,
Mike Tyson's a fascinating person too. Just to like, if you look into his life, like that guy has gone through significant pain. Like, you want to talk about overcoming like tremendous odds. Like, if he has an awesome autobiography, but yeah, man. And like one of the things too, going back to what you mentioned about Alex Honnold, the free solo rock climber, he speaks all the time about like the fact that he like has forced his brain to face like legitimate risk. He's been in actual situations where not only is he in pain, but he's actually in danger. Yes. Now his whole perspective, and I'm not telling people like to free solo, that's a little crazy, but you get the point. But now his perspective is like, we always say like, don't sweat the small stuff, but he talks about it all the time. Like, he was on a podcast saying, he's like, yeah, I was walking through the airport and everybody was just like so stressed and so miserable and just like so like, it was like, this is all fine. Like, you missed your flight. Like, when you do really hard things, you get this new perspective when you're in life, and that you start to understand that, like, you start to approach life like, it's okay, like, it's all going to be okay. You don't, like, when you face legitimate challenges, legitimate adversity, legitimate pain, it's like, you don't have to, those trips to the airport become a lot easier. Oh, like.
That's very well said, and that is so true. I mean, we talk about it like that for you guys all the time, right? Half of the things that you do at the gym here are between the ears. Yeah. It's like, how do you take this experience of what you did at the gym, which was hard, and you guys shared it, like, you guys do hard things when you come here, and then how does that allow you to look at life from a completely different perspective? the jam at Trader Joe's, even though it's chaos, you know, is it that big of a deal, you know? Or why do we decide in our minds to make things more negative than they have to be? And again, like that's kind of just part of how our brain operates. And going back to that awareness in our thoughts is like, who's really speaking? You know, like is that our conditioned brain to think negatively? And then how do we come back to like who we are and those thoughts of like, yeah, it's okay. Things are going to be okay. It's all working out the way it's supposed to be. So yeah, I think for the topic of pain, I think that's pretty much where we wanted to go with this today, or at least where I was thinking. I'm just kind of wrapping up, just talking about, I want to come back to this again, like, how are you? I like to end things on a question for you guys if you haven't got the flow. I like to have you do some inner reflection. So it's just like, how are you developing your own relationship to pain in all planes? And I'm going to come back to this acronym is practice accomplishing inner necessities. So for you to navigate this pain and practicing accomplishing inner necessities, start with the physical body, right? The inner necessity is you just being aware of little details. Start with body scans and your movement, but also the relationship comes down to, especially for our community here, is like every time when you come in, like, are you going to be able to move the next day? And yes, like sometimes we will challenge you to really push yourself, but you know, you don't need to feel completely trashed. Soreness physically, you know, nervous system wise. Like, I would question, like, is that a good relationship for me? And if you are constantly thinking that, like, why do I feel like I need to trash and terrorize my body like that, right? I want to feel good. I want to think about how I'm moving, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. Yeah. What's my relationship to emotional pain? You know, the idea is just for this is to allow yourself to feel the polarity of emotions, right? Allow yourself to feel, you know, I don't want to say hate, but like sadness, grief, discomfort, dislike, and just be aware of it, right? It's this consciousness experiment of like, I'm aware of it. I don't really want to feel like this. Yeah. How do I take this emotion and move this towards excitement, joy, passion, you know, gratitude, all those things that, you know, are going to make you feel happier overall in the long term. Yeah. How do I develop a relationship to my thoughts, right? I know that they're going to be all over the place, right? So practicing this, accomplishing the inner necessity is just to know that these thoughts are going to come all over the place and they're conditioned. And how do I know which ones are really me? And then the last thing I talk about with the spiritual, which I said was like finding purpose and navigating, you know, this greater passion for yourself and what you do. How do you come back to developing a relationship with the consciousness of love, which is accepting, forgiving, non-judgment, compassion? And when you can start to navigate those four things in a relationship with inner necessities, then we're starting to actually grow spiritually. And it doesn't have to be in the spiritual sense, you know, with like religion and belief systems. It's just you increasing your state of being that is more open to connecting to yourself and connecting to others. And yeah, pain goes in a lot of different planes, right? So start with these four, start just doing inner reflection, and also like seek strain. Yeah. Seek the hard path, seek the challenging path. Now, not necessarily saying it has to be as deep as, you know, free solo or, you know, some of these really challenging endeavors, right? Or, you know, going for a marathon without any preparation, right? Which you obviously are prepared. You're prepared. I'm prepared, yeah. But I'm just saying for everybody. Yeah. Right? But yeah, you know, there's layers to it.
Yeah, and I think my last thing is find, when you do that exploration, like when you explore pain across all planes, try to like really identify that one area of pain that you gotta face, you know. And it's not one of those things like when I'm sitting in school, I can look at Marco's answer and see what works for him. Like, because it's not going to
Oh,
work
yeah.
for me. You know, you're going to have only you know, and like only you know, like you know, after enough of this like inner exploration, like all right, this is it. I gotta just do it. So just find that one area that's the most painful, that one sticking point, and just go through it.
Perfect. Yeah, honesty and truth. No cheating on tests now, all right? Face it yourself.
Yep, can't be.
That actually came up during my meditations this weekend. Just like honesty and truth. Be honest with yourself. Be true to yourself, and face your fears, y'all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great conversation today.
Yeah.
I was excited to talk about this one. Got a few more really good ones coming up, especially as the holidays are approaching. We got the holiday party approaching, guys. If you have not RSVP'd for the holiday party, you got to do it ASAP. Please and thank you. And then, with the next few coming weeks, expect the other side of the building to become occupied by Dr. Chris Live. So we got really exciting things going on for our community the rest of the year and into 2025. So thanks a lot for tuning in, everybody. Love you guys. All right, we'll see you next week.
Keep showing up.
Peace.